The IV pump beside my bed kept clicking every few seconds while my daughter slept under a hospital blanket no bigger than a dish towel. I had one hand over my incision and the other around my phone when my mother said, "Sweetheart, Vanessa already paid for the suite." Like a cruise cabin was a legal obligation and my 6-week-old baby was an inconvenience. 10 minutes later, I hired an emergency night nurse with money I did not have, opened the recurring transfer my parents had lived on for almost a decade, and pressed cancel. 2 hours after that, my grandfather walked into my hospital room holding a manila folder and said, "Natalie, before your mother gets here, you need to see what they filed with my attorney." My name is Natalie Mercer. I'm 33 years old. That was the night I learned my parents had not just abandoned me when I needed them. They had been using my money, my signature, and my name to build a paper trail against me for years. My daughter, Lily, had been born early after a pregnancy that ended in emergency surgery and a blur of blood pressure cuffs, steroid shots, and doctors saying things in careful voices. By the time she was 6 weeks old, I had learned to sleep in 20-minute pieces and read medical discharge papers like they were scripture. That Thursday, I was back in the hospital with a postpartum infection, feverish and shaking, while Lily was at home with a temporary sitter who could only stay until 6. My husband was gone. Not dead, not deployed. Just gone in that clean, cowardly way some men leave when life becomes paperwork and crying and co-pays. He had signed the birth certificate and then moved back to Colorado 2 weeks later, promising to figure out support soon. So when the doctor said they wanted to keep me overnight, I did what I had always done. I called my mother. Linda Mercer answered over music and clinking glasses. "Mom," I said, trying not to sound scared, "I need help tonight. They're admitting me. Lily can't stay with the sitter past 6. There was a pause. Then my sister Vanessa's voice in the background, bright and annoyed. "Is that Natalie again?" My mother lowered her voice, but not enough. "We're boarding tomorrow morning. Your father already arranged the airport car." "I'm in the hospital," I said. "Lily is 6 weeks old." "Honey, I understand," she said, in the tone she used when she wanted credit for being kind while doing nothing. "But Vanessa already paid for the suite. It's non-refundable." I remember staring at the pale blue curtain around my bed. I remember the smell of antiseptic. I remember realizing that if I cried, my stitches would hurt. For 9 years, I had sent my parents $4,500 every month. It started when I was 24, and my father, Robert Mercer, told me his construction consulting work had collapsed after a back injury. My mother said the mortgage was behind. Vanessa had 2 children by then, and somehow her emergencies were always family emergencies. I had a good job in medical device compliance, and I was the daughter who answered calls, signed forms, moved money, fixed things. So I set up the transfer. Every month, $4,500 left my account and went to theirs under the memo line. Family support. I never missed one. Not when I was saving for maternity leave. Not when my divorce attorney asked why I was supporting 2 able-bodied adults. Not when my father bought a new truck and called it used because it had 8,000 miles on it. I told myself they were my parents. I told myself family was not a spreadsheet. But that night, family became a spreadsheet. After I hung up, I called an emergency newborn care agency from my hospital bed. The intake woman was gentle and professional. Overnight care, rush placement, background check nurse, holiday weekend rate. I gave her my credit card and listened as she said, "We can have someone at your home by 5:30. Then I opened my banking app. Recurring external transfer. Linda and Robert Mercer. $4,500 monthly. Next payment scheduled tomorrow. My finger hovered over the cancel button longer than I want to admit. Not because they deserved the money, because I had been trained to believe that stopping it made me cruel. Then Lily's sitter texted me a picture of my daughter asleep in a swing, tiny fists near her face, completely unaware that her grandmother had chosen a balcony room on deck 9 over her. I pressed cancel. Confirmation screen appeared. Recurring transfer terminated. At 7:12 p.m., my father texted first. "What did you do?" At 7:15, my mother called 3 times. At 7:22, Vanessa sent one message. "You're seriously punishing everyone because you had a baby?" I didn't answer. At 8:04, my grandfather, Arthur Mercer, walked in. He was 81, tall, stooped, and still wore dress shoes to hospitals because he believed institutions deserved respect. He looked at the IV line, then at my face, then at the folder under his arm. "Your mother called me hysterical," he said. "Not because you're sick, because you stopped the transfers." My throat tightened. "Grandpa, I can't do it anymore." "I know," he said, "and I should have asked questions sooner." He pulled a chair close to my bed and opened the folder. Inside were copies of bank statements, attorney letters, and a document with my name typed across the top. Promissory note and family advancement acknowledgement. The amount listed was $486,000. The borrower was me. The lenders were my parents. At the bottom was a signature that looked like mine, but colder, flatter, wrong. I stared at the date, June 18th, 2015. That was the month I started sending them money. My grandfather tapped the notary's seal with one shaking finger. "They told my estate attorney your monthly payments were repayment on a family loan," he said. "They used this to argue you'd already received your inheritance." The room went so quiet I could hear the IV pump click again. I had never borrowed $486,000 from my parents. I had been paying them because I thought they were drowning. And according to the folder in my grandfather's hands, they had been telling the legal system I was the one who owed them. My first instinct was to laugh, because the alternative was screaming hard enough to reopen my incision. "That's not my signature," I said. Grandpa's jaw tightened. "I didn't think so." He spread the papers across my blanket with careful hands. There were copies of wire receipts from my account to my parents, 9 years of them, each one labeled by my mother in neat handwriting. Repayment, repayment, repayment. My stomach turned. I put family support in the memo line. "They printed their bank records," he said. "Not yours. On their side, they added notes afterward." I looked down at my sleeping daughter, her tiny mouth moving like she was dreaming of milk. "Why would they do this?" Grandpa took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Because I changed my will." The sentence landed like a second diagnosis. I knew my grandfather was comfortable. He had owned storage facilities, a small commercial strip, and farmland outside Dayton that developers had been circling for years. But Grandpa never acted wealthy. He drove a 12-year-old Buick and reused coffee tins for screws. "My attorney drafted a new estate plan last month," he said. "I left the lake house to you." I blinked. "What?" "And a trust for Lily, education, health care, housing if needed, protected. Not through your parents." The room tilted slightly. "Grandpa, I didn't ask." "I know," he said. "That's why I did it." He slid another page toward me. "Your mother and father found out. I don't know how. Yesterday, their attorney sent this to mine. They're claiming you've already received nearly $500,000 from them, and that leaving you additional assets would be inequitable to Vanessa." I read the phrase 3 times. Inequitable to Vanessa. Vanessa, whose first wedding my parents paid for. Vanessa, whose second wedding Grandpa paid for after she cried that the first one didn't count. Vanessa, whose kids' private school tuition had somehow become a grandparent expense. Meanwhile, I had been sending my parents enough money every year to equal a second salary. My phone lit up again. "Mom." Grandpa glanced at it. "Don't answer. I want to hear what she says." He hesitated, then nodded once. I put it on speaker. My mother's voice exploded through the room. "Natalie Elise Mercer, you turn that transfer back on right now." "No, are you okay?" "No, how is Lily?" Not even a fake soft opening. I looked at Grandpa. His face hardened. "Mom," I said, "I'm in the hospital." "And I'm at home trying to understand why your father just got a bank alert that tomorrow's payment was canceled. Because I needed that money for emergency childcare." For one night? She snapped. You don't blow up an arrangement over one night. An arrangement. That was what she called my survival. An arrangement. Grandpa leaned closer to the phone. Linda. Silence. Then, sharply, Dad. Yes, he said. I'm here. Her tone changed so fast it was almost impressive. Oh, Daddy, good. Maybe you can talk sense into her. She's emotional from the baby and whatever infection this is. Grandpa picked up the promissory note. I'm looking at the document you sent Leonard. Another silence. This one had teeth. My mother said, that's a private legal matter. It has Natalie's name on it. She knows what she signed. I sat up too fast. Pain flashed white through my abdomen. I never signed that. My mother gave a small, offended laugh. You don't remember half the things you sign, Natalie. You're always busy. Grandpa's voice dropped. Careful. That one word changed the air. My mother inhaled. Dad, this is not your concern. My estate plan is exactly my concern. And there it was. The real reason she called me. Not the money alone. The will. My father's voice came on, lower and angrier. Arthur, with respect, Natalie has been paying back a family advancement for years. We have documentation. Then you won't mind providing the original note, Grandpa said. A beat. We have copies, Dad replied. I asked for the original. My father said nothing. Grandpa looked at me, and I saw grief in his eyes. Not confusion, confirmation. He had suspected. Now he knew. My mother recovered first. Natalie, you need to stop this. Vanessa is crying. The kids heard there might not be a trip. I almost choked. Vanessa is crying? She planned this cruise for months. We leave at 7 in the morning. I needed you tonight. You have always been resourceful, she said, as if that excused her from being my mother. Lily stirred in the bassinet and made a soft sound. My entire body reacted before my mind did. I reached for her, wincing, and Grandpa stood to help me lift her gently into my arms. My mother kept talking. If you embarrass this family over money, I don't know how we come back from that. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to make her understand. You're right, I said. I don't know how we come back from this either. Then I hung up. Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder. Natalie, listen to me. Tomorrow morning, we're doing 3 things. First, you're getting well. Second, we're meeting my attorney by video. Third, you are pulling every bank record you have. I looked down at my daughter. And my parents? His face went still. They made this legal, he said, so we answer legally. At 11:43 that night, while Lily slept against my chest, Vanessa posted a photo online. 4 passports, tropical nails, champagne flutes. Caption, some of us choose joy instead of drama. By morning, that post would become evidence. By 6:10 the next morning, my mother had texted 11 times. Not once did she ask whether my fever had broken. Dad wrote only one sentence. You are making a mistake you cannot afford. Vanessa sent a selfie from the airport lounge. Must be exhausting being the victim all the time. I stared at it while a nurse checked my incision and told me my white blood cell count was still high. Lily was asleep in the hospital bassinet beside me because the night nurse Grandpa hired had driven her over at dawn with a diaper bag, formula, and more kindness than my own family had managed in 24 hours. At 8:30, Grandpa's attorney appeared on my laptop screen. Leonard Shaw was in his 70s, with silver hair and the expression of a man who had spent decades watching families become wolves around money. Natalie, he said gently, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I was propped against pillows, sweating through a hospital gown, while Grandpa sat beside me taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Leonard shared his screen. There it was again. The promissory note. $486,000. My fake signature. A notary stamp from a woman named Carol Dempsey. Leonard enlarged the signature line. Do you recognize this document? No. Did you receive $486,000 from your parents? No, I sent the money. "Did you ever agree that those payments were loan repayments?" "Never." He nodded. "Good. Then we begin by preserving records." For the next hour, I downloaded everything: bank statements, transfer confirmations, emails from my mother with subject lines like, "Thank you, honey," and "We'd lose the house without you." Texts from Dad promising, "Just until I'm back on my feet." A voicemail from 6 years earlier where Mom cried because the furnace died, followed by a Facebook photo of Vanessa at a luxury spa 2 days later with my mother tagged in the background. Leonard's face changed as the files came in. "This is not ambiguous," he said finally. "Your memo lines say family support. Their communications say need, help, emergency. Nothing here suggests debt repayment." Grandpa asked, "What about the notary?" Leonard leaned closer to the camera. "That is where this becomes serious." He pulled up a public notary registry. Carol Dempsey's commission had expired in 2017. The note was supposedly notarized in 2015, so that alone didn't prove anything. But Leonard kept digging while we watched. Then he stopped. "Arthur," he said quietly, "Carol Dempsey died in March of 2014. The room froze. Grandpa's pen stopped moving. I looked at the screen, then at the document. The dead woman had supposedly notarized my signature 14 months after her funeral. Leonard removed his glasses. "I need you both to understand what this means. This is not a family misunderstanding. This appears to be a forged financial instrument submitted through counsel in an estate matter." My stomach rolled. "My parents forged a dead notary?" "Someone did," Leonard said carefully, "and your parents presented it." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We're boarding. I hope you're proud of yourself." Below it was a picture of her and Dad smiling on a gangway, sunglasses on, ocean behind them. I forwarded it to Leonard. He sighed. "Thank you. Keep sending everything." By noon, Leonard had drafted a preservation letter to my parents and their attorney demanding the original promissory note, all communications concerning it, and all records related to the alleged loan. He also instructed them not to destroy, alter, or delete any electronic documents. Grandpa read the final line aloud. "Failure to preserve relevant evidence may result in sanctions and referral to appropriate authorities." He smiled without warmth. "Send it." At 12:17, it went out. At 12:34, Vanessa called me. I let it ring. She called again. Then she texted, "What did you do to Mom? She's sobbing in the cabin." I typed back with shaking fingers. "I asked for the original document you all claim I signed." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "You're sick." I almost answered, but Grandpa took my phone gently. "No more direct engagement," he said. "They want you emotional. Don't give them useful chaos." Useful chaos. That phrase stayed with me, because my entire role in the family had been to absorb chaos and convert it into money. At 3 o'clock, the hospital discharged me with antibiotics, warnings, and a printed sheet telling me not to lift anything heavier than my baby. Grandpa drove us home. The emergency nurse followed behind in her car. When we pulled into my driveway, there was a white envelope taped to my front door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a photocopy of the promissory note and a handwritten message. "Stop digging. You signed what you signed." Grandpa took one look and said, "Do not touch anything else." I had already touched the envelope. He photographed it on the porch, called Leonard, then called someone I hadn't heard him mention in years. "Eddie," Grandpa said into his phone, "it's Arthur Mercer. Are you still with County Investigations?" He listened, eyes fixed on the envelope. Then he said, "I need to report a possible forgery, elder financial manipulation, and harassment of my granddaughter." My knees nearly gave out, because until that moment I thought we were fighting about money. But as Grandpa helped me inside with Lily tucked against my chest, I saw my security camera blinking above the door. It had recorded whoever left the envelope, and when Grandpa pulled up the footage, The person on my porch wasn't my mother. It was Vanessa's husband. Vanessa's husband, Mark, stood on my porch at 2:18 p.m. wearing a baseball cap in the nervous posture of a man who knew exactly how illegal his errand felt. He looked straight at the camera. Then he taped the envelope to my door and walked away. Grandpa watched the clip twice without speaking. The emergency nurse, Denise, stood in my kitchen holding Lily and pretending not to listen. I felt strangely calm, not peaceful, more like a circuit breaker had tripped inside me. Vanessa said she was on the cruise, I said. Grandpa's mouth flattened. Apparently not all of them boarded. Leonard answered on the first ring. Grandpa sent him the video. 5 minutes later, Leonard called back. "Do not contact Mark," he said. "Do not contact Vanessa. I'm forwarding this to Detective Harris. Natalie, preserve the original envelope in a paper bag if you have one." I laughed once, sharp and empty. "I have freezer bags and burp cloths." "A clean folder then. Minimal handling." While Grandpa found one, my phone lit up. Vanessa, then Mark, then my mother. One after another, like they had coordinated. Leonard said, "Let them go to voicemail." They did. Vanessa's voicemail came first. "Natalie, you need to call me before you ruin my marriage over your little breakdown. Mark was just trying to help Mom. Nobody threatened you. You're twisting everything because Grandpa likes you better." Mark's was shorter. "Hey, I didn't know what was in it. Linda asked me to drop off paperwork. Don't make this weird." Then Mom's. Her voice was no longer sweet or angry. It was cold. "You have no idea what you've started." Grandpa took the phone from my hand and set it face down on the table. Detective Eddie Harris arrived at 5:40 p.m. in plain clothes, with tired eyes and a small notebook. He hugged Grandpa first, then introduced himself to me, like this was an ordinary visit and not the collapse of my family. I gave him the envelope, the video, the texts, and copies of the note. When he saw Carol Dempsey's name, he stopped writing. "You're sure she's deceased?" Leonard was on speaker. "Public obituary, death certificate available, notary commission ended posthumously only because the registry wasn't updated until expiration." Detective Harris exhaled. "That's bold." That word made me sick. Not cruel, not desperate, bold. Like my parents had gambled that I would never question anything with my name on it. Harris asked me when I began sending money. Why? Whether anyone had access to my documents, whether my parents ever kept copies of my driver's license. "Yes," I said slowly. "In 2015, Mom helped me renew my passport before a work trip. She kept the copies because their printer worked better." Grandpa closed his eyes. Harris wrote that down. Then he asked, "Do either of your parents know a notary? Someone who might have had an old stamp?" I thought of church fundraisers, real estate papers, Dad's contractor friends. "I don't know." Grandpa did. "Robert's cousin worked at Dempsey Title," he said, "years ago." Detective Harris looked up. "Name?" "Paul Mercer." By 7 o'clock, Harris was gone. Leonard had filed a supplemental notice with Grandpa's estate attorney, and Denise had convinced me to eat toast while Lily slept in a wrap against my chest. Then Grandpa's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Robert. Leonard had told us not to answer family calls. Grandpa answered anyway, but put it on speaker without saying hello. My father's voice came through tight and furious. "You brought police into this?" Grandpa said, "You brought a forged document into my attorney's office." "I didn't forge anything." "Then produce the original." Dad hesitated, just half a second. "There was a flood in the basement," he said. "Some papers were damaged." I almost smiled. It was the same basement that had supposedly flooded when they needed $8,000 for repairs. The same month Dad bought the truck. Grandpa's voice was deadly calm. "How convenient." "You're letting Natalie poison you," Dad snapped. "She's unstable, postpartum. Everyone knows it." My skin went cold. There it was, the next paper trail. Unstable mother, emotional daughter, too overwhelmed to remember, too hysterical to trust. Grandpa leaned toward the phone. If I hear you use her medical condition against her again, I will add that to the list." Dad lowered his voice. "Arthur, think carefully. If this goes public, it hurts all of us." "No," Grandpa said. "It hurts the people who lied." He hung up. For the first time all day, I cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just tears sliding down while I held my daughter and understood how close they had come to stealing not only money, but credibility. Grandpa sat beside me. "I should have seen it," he whispered. I shook my head. I didn't. The next morning, Leonard called at 9:05. "You need to sit down," he said. I was already sitting, feeding Lily. Leonard continued, "Their attorney has withdrawn from representation." Grandpa straightened. "Why?" "Because after our preservation demand, he asked Linda and Robert for the original note. They sent him a scanned version instead." "That's not enough," Grandpa said. "No," Leonard replied, "especially because the metadata shows it was created 3 days ago." I stopped breathing. Leonard's voice sharpened. And Natalie, the file name was Nat_inheritance_block_final. Nat_inheritance_block_final. For a second, all I could hear was Lily swallowing softly, completely unaware that 3 adults had apparently named a file after excluding her mother from a family estate. Grandpa's face went gray. Leonard said, "The former attorney is cooperating. He says he was told the original existed and the scan was from family records. He is turning over all communications." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Leonard said, "they stopped controlling the story." They tried anyway. My parents came home early from the cruise, not because they were sorry, because Detective Harris called while they were somewhere between Miami and Nassau and asked both of them not to delete anything from their phones. Vanessa posted one last dramatic update about betrayal, then took it down 12 minutes later. Mark broke first. He told Detective Harris that my mother had called him crying, claiming I was mentally spiraling, and that she needed him to drop off documents because I was trying to steal from the family. He insisted he didn't know about the forged notary, but he admitted Vanessa knew her parents were trying to balance Grandpa's will. Balance. That was their word for theft. Paul Mercer, Dad's cousin, was found 2 weeks later in Florida. He had worked at Dempsey Title before it closed and had kept boxes of old office supplies in his garage, including expired notary materials. He claimed he only helped recreate a lost family document. But his emails told a different story. My mother had written, "Natalie won't fight it if it looks official. She never does." I read that sentence in Leonard's office with Grandpa beside me. I thought it would destroy me. Instead, it freed me. Because she was right about the old Natalie. The old Natalie translated cruelty into obligation. The old Natalie believed love meant paying bills quietly and being grateful for crumbs of attention. But the woman holding Lily that day was not the old Natalie. The criminal case moved slowly, the way real justice often does. There were charges for forgery-related offenses and attempted fraud. My parents took plea agreements before trial. Paul did too. Vanessa avoided charges, mostly because being selfish was not illegal and Mark had been careful to say she never touched the documents. But Grandpa changed his estate plan again. This time, Leonard filed everything with reinforced safeguards. The lake house went into a trust. Lily's education fund became untouchable by anyone but an independent trustee. My parents and Vanessa were each left $1 and a paragraph stating why. I never saw that paragraph until Grandpa showed it to me. It said, "I will not reward those who mistook Natalie's generosity for weakness." I cried harder over that sentence than I had over the money. The civil side ended with a restitution agreement. I did not get back every dollar. People like my parents spend other people's sacrifices as fast as they receive them. But liens were placed. Assets were sold. Dad's truck disappeared first. Then the timeshare I hadn't known they owned. The $4,500 transfers never resumed. At first, that felt like stepping off a cliff. Then my mortgage got easier. My maternity leave stopped feeling like a countdown to disaster. I hired Denise part-time for 3 months and paid her without flinching. I bought Lily the expensive hypoallergenic formula and did not feel guilty once. My mother sent letters. I returned them unopened. My father sent one text from an unknown number. "You ruined this family." I replied only once. No. I stopped funding the lie. Then I blocked him. 6 months later, Grandpa and I took Lily to the lake house for the first time since everything happened. It was early evening, the kind of Ohio summer night where the air smells like cut grass and warm water. Grandpa sat on the porch with Lily in his lap, showing her how the light moved across the lake. "She'll never remember this," I said. He smiled down at her. "You will." Inside, on the kitchen table, there was no manila folder, no forged note, no bank statement spread out like evidence of my foolishness. There was just a diaper bag, 2 mugs of coffee, and Lily's tiny sun hat. Grandpa lifted her little hand and waved it toward the water. For 9 years, I thought canceling that transfer would make me a bad daughter. But standing there, watching my grandfather hold my baby in the golden light, I finally understood. That click in the hospital bed had not ended my family. It had saved the only part of it worth protecting. And if you were me, from that hospital bed, would you have hit cancel too? If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And if you want more stories like this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.